My first night in the townhouse, I thought I smelled my grandmother's lavender perfume drifting through empty halls. But when I followed it, there was nothing but peeling wallpaper and a fine layer of dust on every surface. I'd inherited this place because of a promise I made to uncover the truth behind my great-aunt Marianne's disappearance in 1974. And I wasn't about to let a creaking floorboard or a stubborn lock stop me. As a historian for the local Heritage Society, my job was to catalog every artifact, every faded photograph, and every whispered rumor tied to this house. If I failed to find proof of Marianne's existence here, the society would pull funding and I'd lose my reputation, and perhaps the only family legacy I'd ever truly cared about. I unbolted the front door at dusk and stepped inside, my flashlight revealing a narrow foyer lined with once lavish wallpaper now curling at the seams. The air was stale but carried a weight, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I set my bag down and retrieved the tiny tape recorder my grandmother had pressed into my hand, its red light blinking like a heartbeat in the gloom. According to her last letter, Marianne left behind a message in the walls, coordinates scrawled under layers of paint. My pulse quickened as I pressed record and began brushing at a corner where the pattern seemed uneven, revealing a jagged line of pencil beneath. Before I could trace it, a low murmur drifted through the plaster, a voice so soft I thought it was my imagination. It said my name. I froze, breath shallow, and the recorder picked up the faint echo, my voice trembling as I whispered, "Is someone there?" The murmur stopped, and for a moment I convinced myself it was the wind rattling through broken windows. Then, from the far end of the hall, came a tentative knock, like someone tapping on the wall from inside. My heart thudded against my ribs. I was alone, and yet I wasn't. The coordinates lay beneath my fingertips, and I knew that once I followed them, I couldn't turn back. Not without the answers I was desperate to find. The next morning, I woke with a dull ache behind my eyes and the taste of dust on my tongue. But I couldn't ignore the recorder's blinking light. I pressed play and heard the same soft tapping, then a fragment of a voice whispering numbers. 3.7, 1.2. My pulse pounded as I scrolled through the pale pencil marks beneath the wallpaper. 3.7 and 1.2 coordinates that made no sense on any map I'd studied. I fetched the architectural plans I'd brought and plotted the figures against the room's dimensions, realizing they pointed to a section of floor just beyond the living room hearth. By noon, I was prying up warped floorboards, fingertips raw and shaking, until I uncovered a shallow cavity containing a tarnished metal box. The latch squealed as I opened it, revealing a tarnished locket engraved with the initials M.R., Marianne's initials. Inside lay a faded photograph of two girls holding hands in this very room, but one face was scratched away. A cold breeze swept the hollow, and I glanced around the silent house, knowing I was no longer merely researching history. I was digging into something that lived. I slipped the locket into my pocket, and that was the point of no return. I had Marianne's memory in my hand, and I would not leave until I understood who had erased her, or what still watched me from the walls. By the third night, the house's breath felt like damp cloth against my neck. I sat at the kitchen table beneath a single bulb, locket in one hand and a crumpled journal page in the other, found wedged behind a cabinet hinge when the wind howled through the broken window. The entry was dated June 13, 1974, and written in Marianne's spidery script. They watch me from beneath the plaster. I can feel them pulling at the seams. My pulse thundered as I pressed the locket against the paper, realizing the date coordinates shifted from 3.7, 1.2 to 613, her last desperate clue. I needed to decipher where beneath the plaster led. If I failed, Marianne's story would die with me, and my career would crumble along with my sanity. I set out into the hall, flashlight trembling in my grip, and ran my fingers along the faded floral pattern until I reached the living room hearth once more. Beneath a crack in the hearthstone, I found a hidden latch that swung a narrow panel outward. Inside lay a collection of brittle letters tied with ribbon, each postmarked over decades, addressed to Marianne by someone signing only J. The first letter spoke of apologies, the last of regret and a promise to free her. As I opened the final envelope, the room's temperature dropped, and I inhaled the scent of lavender again. Only this time it carried a note of something metallic, like blood. I heard breathing, too shallow to be mine. My flashlight beam landed on a smear of red along the panel's edge, turning my stomach as my heart pounded against wood and bone. The letters described a pact. Marianne and Jay had bound themselves to the house to hide from something beyond their control. Now I understood. The more I unearthed, the more I called whatever lingered here back to life. My fingers trembling, I scanned the letters for a final clue, and my breath caught on one phrase: to break the seal, follow the echo of my voice. Behind me, the walls groaned as if acknowledging the summons. I had to trace that echo deeper into the house, into rooms where no light reached, because if I didn't finish what Marianne started, I would never leave these walls alive. Don't forget to like this tale of anxious calm and subscribe to WhisperTales for your next nightly escape. I pressed deeper into the shadowed corridor, my breathing shallow as the beam of my flashlight quivered against warped floorboards and splintered door frames, every step announcing itself in agonizing creaks. The whisper that had beckoned me pulsed through the walls now with greater urgency, a soft lament that shuffled beneath layers of paint and plaster like a wounded thing struggling to be heard. I reached the narrow stairwell behind the living room. Its steps collapsed into a heap of rotten wood, and dropped to my knees to squeeze through the gap, the scent of damp earth and mold clinging to my clothes. Below, an arched stone doorway revealed a sub-basement I hadn't known existed, lined with shelves of dusty relics, rusted keys, yellowed baptismal certificates, and a cracked phonograph whose horn was occluded by cobwebs. My heart pounded against bone as I approached, knowing that the last letter spoke of breaking the seal with the echo of my voice, and here lay the instrument that could replay the past. With trembling fingers, I wound the phonograph's crank and dropped the needle into the groove. At first, all I heard was hiss, but then Marianne's voice, distant yet defiant, reciting a name I'd never heard before: Josiah. The walls around me trembled as though responding, and the phonograph's music slowed, warping her words into something final and tortured. I staggered back, the locket heavy against my chest, and realized that Josiah was the J who bound her to this house, and that he must still linger here, tethered by guilt or something darker. A low rumble shook the stones above, dust raining down, and I knew in that moment I could not turn back. To fail now would trap me forever like Marianne, another echo lost beneath the walls. My breath caught when the phonograph fell silent, and the walls exhaled that same icy sigh, as if inhaling my fear. I stared at the cracked horn, then forced my legs to carry me toward a narrow passage I'd missed in the wavering beam, a bricked-in doorway set into the far wall. My fingers trembled as I traced the mortar lines, and the locket's warmth pulsed against my chest, guiding me. When I pressed it to a tiny inset notch between two bricks, the wall shuddered and a section swung inward on rusted hinges, revealing a cramped chamber bathed in faint, phosphorescent mold. Inside lay a tattered journal bound with ribbon, its pages brittle but still legible beneath a thin layer of dust. I opened it to the final entry, Marianne's cramped handwriting pleading for mercy and confessing how Josiah had chained her spirit here, using her voice as a key. Each word felt like a blade twisting in my gut, but I pressed on, reading her last line aloud. "Speak my name into the stone and set me free." The air thickened, and the plaster under my fingertips vibrated as if alive. I raised my voice, my words echoing in the hollow beneath the house. "Marianne R." The chamber trembled, and a shard of mortar dislodged, drifting to the floor as a soft sigh filled the space. For a moment, the silence that followed felt hopeful, but then the ground beneath me groaned, and I realized that breaking her seal had shattered the barrier between life and whatever lingered here. I stepped back, Locket clutched tight, knowing I was closer than ever to unraveling the final secret, and that failure now would leave me as another echo trapped behind these walls, unheard and forgotten. I spoke Marianne's name into the hollow stone, and the air snapped like a drawn bowstring, releasing a breath of wind that rattled my flashlight against the floor. For an instant, everything was still. The phosphorescent mold ceased its glow, the dust hung motionless, and I dared to think I had succeeded. A soft voice, unfamiliar yet intimate, whispered, "Free at last," drifting through the chamber and fading into silence. Heart racing, I backed toward the stairwell, feeling the walls pulse with relief, until a low rumble rolled across the stones and the exit behind me collapsed in a cloud of plaster. Trapped, I dropped the locket, and it skittered across the floor, throwing sparks of silver in the flashlight's beam. The journal's final entry fluttered open on a phrase I'd read 100 times, but only now understood. "They remain until another takes their place." My breath caught as I realized Marianne was gone, her spirit untethered, and in her stead, something else stirred. Behind me, the walls sighed, and I heard my own name hissed from every crack. I turned the beam of my flashlight and saw, etched into the plaster where the hearth once stood, a face I recognized. My own reflection twisted and half erased, the same way Marianne's photo had been scratched. The house had answered the echo of my voice by forging me into its next memory. I raced toward the rubble, lunging at the only gap I could find, but the corridor stretched impossibly long, the floorboards creaking with each step I didn't take. The tape recorder in my coat pocket blinked to life with the red pulse of a heartbeat, and my trembling hand raised it to my ear. A voice, my voice, flooded my skull, repeating the coordinates, the numbers shifting like a living thing. I realized then that the walls spoke not for Marianne, but for me. I had become the echo beneath the plaster, bound to whisper my own name through endless night. If you felt the walls breathe with me, remember that every silence holds a story. Please like this tale of anxious calm and subscribe to WhisperTales for your next nightly escape.